so don't hit your microphone.
Oh, the Bobby will come in there too, so we'll have the two guards in the lobby.
It's pretty dang close. Okay. Live streaming.
We're going to get started in about a minute. We're waiting on Kyle. We think he's coming. He has the furthest distance to drive. I think Debbie gave you all the updated itinerary. We have Stacy Finley here. She's going to be giving an update from ARA. She gave out a handout. I also forwarded a PowerPoint to you via email last night, I believe, or yesterday. Then Angela Cox should be here. Part 2 of the discussion on budgeting numbers. Mandy should be here about the EMS shortfall that you were forwarded information on. Then we need to talk about some other lit matters prior to our meeting on April the 10th. So. Well, there's Angela. You didn't bring Kyle with you, did you? we're going to start. It's a work session, so we don't have to have a quorum, but it's just nice to have a quorum. And we actually have one. We have 4 out of 7. I knew 2 was not coming. The other one we're expecting, so he may be coming in just a little bit, Stacy. I'm going to call this work session order of the Henry County Council on March 28th, 2024. We're going to begin with just a little bit. I already covered that we're going to have Stacy Finley. She's representing ARA, which is Administrative Resources Administration or Association or something. And we pay them, just like we kind of pay the EIRPC, which is the Regional Planning Commission. We pay them to help with Okra. They've done some owner-occupied rounds after we got the $333,000 from Stellar. Then Okra sought us. After that first successful round that ARA administered, we had a second round that they actually sought Henry County to apply, and we were successful with that, with ARA's assistance. I think you're new to ARA or fairly new. Eric Fry, I think, left to be something at Columbus, like something deputy mayor. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're number 1 on the itinerary. So Stacy, welcome.
All right, can you hear me? I'm Stacy Finley. I'm new to ARA. I started in December. My background is I've spent all of my career in nonprofit and municipal government. I worked for 2 different municipalities with Parks and Recreation as a grant writer and would oversee construction, and then also as a parks director in Seymour. So I just wanted to come give you have a conversation about what are some of the different resources that ARA can provide, and specifically kind of like a work plan for Henry County moving forward on what this next year is going to look like. ARA, we just celebrated 50 years. We're primarily in the central part of the state. We currently service 13 communities right now. One of the big things about ARA is that we are thought partners. What that means is we come into different communities, and communities will always have an idea of what we also have thought about this area, or can you take a look at our data, our demographics, and give us some ideas of how you could, help us with blight removal or land acquisition, or we just, we'll have different communities that will reach out to us and say, we've recently acquired this grant, but we need help administering it with fair labor standards with the construction of it. And so we're able to help. Number 1, a thought partner. Number 2 is grant writing. I would say the bulk of what we do is grant writing. But with that, there's a lot of administration, not just monitoring, submitting data, making sure the construction with the fair labor standards, and that all government practices are being followed with that. So we administer a lot of grants. I would say that's probably the second biggest thing that we do. For Henry County, I spoke with Eric before he left, and he had pretty detailed notes of what he'd been working on. And I follow you guys in the newspaper, so I am aware of your memorial park. You would like to do some upgrades. I saw that about the big lake that needs some work and needing funding for that. Kind of the next steps, if you were to move forward with seeking additional funding, would be a resolution that would to make Memorial Park a park and not a memorial, and then to start the master plan process. I'm working in other communities right now with doing their master plan. The process takes between 9 months to a year for the park's master plan. The reason it takes so long is there is a large community input for that. And then with what would be provided is it would be a DNR certified. DNR lays it out on what their requirements are. But with a DNR certification, it would make you eligible for Indiana Land and Water Conservation Funds, which they've raised to $1 million. It used to be $500,000. It's $1 million now for Indiana Land and Water Conservation. But you do have to have a 5-year Parks Master Plan on file that's been approved by DNR. So I went through that kind of quickly. I'm going to open it up because I feel like you have questions, and I don't really know what you know about ARA, and I don't want to be repetitive on what, and then if there are parts about ARA that you're not familiar with, I can touch base with those.
Mike's a fairly new member. We got involved with you, starting with Stellar, and the people we drove noses with, the other counties, and then Okra, because Stellar was an offshoot of under Okra, administering the federal community rule at the state level, and your name kept popping up, ARA kept popping up, and when we decided to put monies, we received $333,000 as a result of the 2019 Stellar initiative. Then shortly afterwards, COVID hit, and in fact, it hit while we were planning on what to do with the $333,000. But I remember talking to Eric Fry right after COVID, and he had given us, or had given the park a bid of $10,000 to do this 5-year plan. And now we've been a member of, we've been associated with you now for 4 years, I think. And my understanding is you're actually doing this 5-year plan free as part of our, what we pay you, which I don't know is $10,000 a year or something like that.
Yeah, so as part of being a member, a Park Master Plan is part of that, because as we move forward looking for grants, we're going to need data to support that, and we'll get some of the data that we need to acquire grant funding through this 5-year Park Master Plan process, because there'll be an online component where we seek online survey, and we should typically we receive a lot better online survey results than what we do in person, but we will have some input sessions. But it will be valuable data that we'll need, not just for Indiana Land and Water Conservation Funds, but for other funding. And then if there would be additional funding that we would find applicable for whatever projects you might have. And then we've also helped other communities with like comp plans and that kind of stuff. I'm not really familiar with what you do as a county have as far as comp plans and strategic planning and that kind of stuff, but we can also help with that.
We had a grant writer, but we no longer have a grant writer. Susan, I think, has questions because she's the liaison for our Memorial Park.
Okay, great.
Oh, thank you. So my brain started glitching a little bit when you said change the park from a memorial to a park. And so could you talk about what that looks like? I know that that's going to be a sticking point for some people in the community. So if you could talk about the implications and the process.
It's kind of like the whiskey and bourbon thing. Any park can have a memorial, but it would just open you up to additional funding. I think just being a memorial, it kind of, it narrows your funding stream. Being a park, there's lots of quality of life funding opportunities, and opening it up. And I've been to the Memorial Park, and it's a great space. It's has a large tree canopy, lots of mature trees. Hiking, there was, 2 playgrounds?
I mean, there are more than there are.
Okay.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, so it's like, it is a great space. And so even as far as, we just want to make sure that there's as many funding opportunities that there can be. And I feel like just with it staying a memorial, that really narrows the amount of different grant opportunities. Indiana Land and Water Conservation is kind of a big one, but Indiana Department of Health have had grant opportunities. DNR will have other opportunities. There's different playground companies that would have, but you have to be a park. But I would just, I think more than anything, it's not like the name would have to change, or it's, the identity would have to change. It's how it's classified. It would, because technically a green space with playgrounds, someone that came into your community would say that it is a park with a memorial. I would just say it would be more difficult for me to find you different funding with it being solely memorial. And I think if they would be against it, then I wouldn't say it would be impossible. It would just be narrowing. But I would say having a park with a memorial on it is a unique situation, and you would have different opportunities.
It has a long history, tradition, and as you know, working with other entities, that sometimes change is hard. This is the first I heard anything about designation as a park. There'd be an uprising with some people. I would suggest you work also with our commissioners. They appoint the park board, and there's people in different camps wanting to signify it as a memorial, get it out of the auspices of the county. There's some politics involved that I would just suggest.
It might be hard for you to picture the complications with the name change, is what we're saying.
Well, I don't even think it would have to be a name change. I think more than anything, you just need a 5-year parks master plan.
Right. I guess I'm just saying it seems like it's insignificant to change it from a memorial to a park, but we're just saying it will not be insignificant to change it from a memorial, just so you know.
Well, and I don't know as far as like DNR, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that there's a 5-year parks master plan. And I don't know as
I think everybody agrees with that.
Yes.
That planning is needed and necessary.
Yes.
Definitely.
And so as far as like the legality of changing it, I don't know if there's a way to sidestep that. More than anything, it's the master plan just needs to be completed, and it has to be completed by DNR. And I think that sometimes there's consulting firms that will offer a master plan and it won't be approved by DNR. That's an awful lot of work to go through to not have it approved by DNR.
Right. I've been involved in other groups that I serve on where DNR is a vital part of moving forward.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's probably people on social media tuning in that are writing their retort to your statement now as we speak, or will by the time this is adjourned. So welcome to Henry County. Other things for Stacy?
I have a question for you, Kenan. So this is really interesting. Is there a next step, or is there an action step from the council, or is it just informational?
This is more informational, but it's also good for other departments to know. Angela, for example, she's been involved in grants, other organizations, people that are represented in here are on committees that seek additional funding. I mean, we have ARPA that's winding down, we have opioid, but ARA has a great reputation at the state level for administering grants, and it's good information to know. We had a good relationship with Victoria, I think your predecessor, and Eric Fry, and they worked with us. I think we got, with the monies we brought in with ARA's assistance, it was a big bang for the bucks. I mean, we got hundreds of thousands of dollars in on the $10,000 per year we were paying, so that's the kind of thing county governments love to see. So
I was told that over 50 years we've brought in $750 million.
of $1 billion.
$1 billion, $750 million.
I think you brought in $500,000 for us, and we've paid 30 or 40,000. So
right.
It's well spent.
So I just want to make sure that I guess if we can do as much or as little as what you would like for us to do. We obviously don't come into communities and tell them what we think. It's a matter of like, what would you like for us to do? Would you like for us to dig a little deeper and see if let us know some of your concerns. Let us see your comp plans, any strategic planning you might have done that you were looking to check off some of your goals. We're just here to help you achieve whatever those goals may be.
Well, the county spent over $100,000 6 years ago or so for a comprehensive plan. We use Baker Tilly for a 5-year financial comp plan, and they're going to be giving us a new one within like less than a month and a half. I will use Wagner Irwin Shealy for job classifications, but I would think the thing that you mentioned the most that tickles my ears are the grant. And again, I know that your success and reputation at the state level is extremely valuable because there's a lot of hurdles. Angela knows this. There's a lot of hurdles with things relating to state requirements and federal requirements, especially. And Okra is the kind of the federal monies are coming in from the feds, and Okra distributes it and oversees and administers it. And the fact they sought after us after ARA successfully did the first round of owner-occupied rehab, which was a good portion of the stellar monies we had, and the other portion, again, was with daycare, preschool, and that started more daycare, preschools, and right now we're getting a good reputation in that area of starting those up successfully and getting level 3s and all those kind of things. We're moving up the scale because we were a desert before. So I just wanted people to know, and they can listen in later on YouTube and know that we have resources here to tap, and I hope people tap you. But I don't think the knowledge level is that great. Everything kind of halted during the pandemic.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think Eric's been here once, or Victoria once or twice since then, but I don't think the knowledge level is great of what services you have brought in or are able to bring. So, but I think there's people here to be interested about this park versus memorial thing. I think that there needs to be some discussions outside the park board, probably.
Yeah, so so when I was park director of Seymour, we had a park with a memorial on it, and when I was there, I helped write a grant through Indiana Department of Health. We were a coalition, and we got around $2.5 million to update playgrounds. $1 million of that went towards playgrounds, and that park was one that received a new playground. And so it was that grant actually was for a park. And so it's just examples like that where it's like there are opportunities out there. It would just, I guess it's just additional conversations that we would need to have to make sure that we have all of the opportunities that we can for additional funding. And I've been following you guys in the paper, so I am familiar with Memorial Park. I don't know like the specific culture of the dynamics and everything, but I also brought my card, and so you guys can get a hold of me and we can have conversations, or feel free to send me an email. I feel like this is just kind of the beginning of our work together, so.
I think the information you're sharing is very valuable, and I hope other department heads will tap.
Yeah, I think it helps with
The steps around here, this is a 1867 courthouse, so they did things differently post-Civil War.
Endless as far as grant opportunities.
Okay.
It's just
I hope
a
our
matter
sheriff's listening in. Good.
yeah, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming all the way, I'm guessing, from around Columbus, Bartholomew County. But again, everybody's listening at home or here, invaluable resource, and you've done well for the county.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming this far. I know it's like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Next, we have Angela, and this is a follow-up to some information that she gave us at our last meeting. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you, Council Chairman, for reaching out to Baker Tilly and to WIS, asking for speed up, and much appreciated.
You're welcome. I was shocked when I saw the April 30th, because 5 years, we've never gotten it before June 10th. I remember last May said, can you speed it up? And they said the fastest we could do it was June 10th, and they came on like around June 11th, I think. So that was good. We asked, and you shall receive. And Wagner and Sheila Addy, I think, was on vacation as well. I haven't gotten a response from her.
Yeah. Okay, so as a follow-up, what I just handed you, the front page says your community info, and it's the Henry County opt-in for the 2024, and then if you come down, it shows the opt-in Health First Indiana money for 2025. We received the maximum amount in 2024. I have no reason to believe that we won't receive the maximum again for 2025, which is the 1.4 million. And then I know that says maximum underneath that, but that's just meaning where it says the county match, that's the minimum match that we have to come up with to that maximum number.
How's that relate to what we've budgeted on your, I don't remember the number, 1159 or something?
Yeah, looking at our 1159 is what that, and I just want to point this out just kind of as a point of reference. This year, our group insurance is $247,500. That's 78% of that maximum amount of money that we would have to have that match. And that's just, and I know I'm not telling you that you can do anything. I'm not, if I thought you did it on purpose, we'd be on Fox 59 duking this out. But
Well,
I know
join
you
the
don't.
crowd of people doing that these days.
So I know it's not on purpose, but that, you know, that kind of says something there. 78% of my tax levy, if, you know, at $317,941, is going to daggone health insurance.
So Angela, the 317,000, that would be from the 1159.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That's really not a change as far as our budgeting. I don't remember
I
what
don't
it was
think it's
this year.
terribly much.
But, yeah, I think it's like incremental. It's not
Right.
substantial.
And one of the things that, in just kind of getting my brains back together after COVID, is I gave you copies from the first couple of days in January, starting with 2021, then 22, then 23. So in 21, we're coming off of that first year of the pandemic. And if you add up my property tax, the CVET, FIT, and excise tax, we brought in $408,077.72. And then if you compare that to 2022, and we knew this going in, the state told us that we could expect a drop. So we dropped $24,106.77 between 21 and 22. And then between 22 and 23, those same line items, we dropped $41,321. So that's a total difference of $65,427 from January, from 21 to 23.
And that represents state money.
Yeah, that represents our tax levy.
That's your tax levy.
If I'm understanding this right, because that's the summation of property tax, CVET, FIT, and excise tax. That's a position. That's a couple part-time positions. You know, and I know we're just talking facts here. And then two, you know, to my dismay, I didn't come into 2024 with quite as much carryover as I would have liked, but I understand and see now why. But in 2021, what I brought in, miscellaneous receipts and our fees, was $150,194. In 2022, it went up pretty significantly because we were adamant that we were going to stand up those COVID clinics, and it paid off. So we bumped that up to $211,013 in revenue. And I'm not really sure how we managed this in 2023, other than I had a significant amount of carryover in 2023. I think I started, well, closer to 200,000, but in 2023, our total revenue was 250,466. The windfall is done. We've got a nice vehicle for environmental out of some of that extra money, and we put a lot of money toward part-time to help catch us up on a lot of the things that got neglected over COVID. So it was money well spent. But again, I came into 2024 with like 86,717, and then I had to turn around and do the additional appropriation for the 24 to cover the raises and the longevity. So for the first time in a couple of years, Bobby sent me an email just a little bit ago, and she said, "Angela, your 1159's in the negative." And I had a heart attack, and I went, "Oh, wait. Normal life is it's only in the black 2 times a year, and that's when property taxes come in." So it's not that I'm in a uncharted territory. It just means that the windfall is done. I'm back down to probably what our normal budget is looking like. And so I did come to you earlier and said that I knew that the $715,098 that we had set forth in the 2024 budget, I could not make that. And so knowing that, I put a pin in hiring 2 positions. So the community health worker and the health educator positions combined are $89,439. So if you subtract that from the $715,98, that brings me down to a real budget closer to $625,659. And let's assume that we have the same income and we don't have a dip in 2024. If you subtract the $593,116 from that, it means that I need to come up with $32,542. And even after taking the additional appropriation out, I should be fine with that.
When you say you need that, you need it when? The 32?
Just before the end of the year.
We'll have a much better idea of at the
Exactly.
end of the year where everything.
Exactly. I was worried that I was going to be short closer to 110,000. So I was glad that if I've done this math right, I'm just only going to be 32,000.
So if I followed, then you would have a balance of 50,000 from 80 to, if you take 30, you'll be down around, is that what you're thinking?
Right. So we had the 86.7, and we took 23,000 out of that. So that puts us around 40 something. So if I'm don't do anything sideways, I should be fine with this. And that's not making an adjustment in the health insurance. And I understand the conundrum that puts us in, because we budgeted for that amount, which affects your, the general fund that way.
I know Susan and Shannon have been talking, and they've been CCing me, so I know she knows more. Shannon, who's out of state, probably knows more. But
He's just been researching.
And
I don't know if he already talked to you about his research, but, some counties cover it all in the general fund, which I think historically just wasn't done because the general fund had been run into the ground. So it was distributed across to other,
it's probably when
departments and
that
tax levies.
materialized, when we were running on fumes, it probably had to
Right.
do something out of survival mode.
And then he said some counties use the previous year's actuals, and then they make an additional appropriation through the year to adjust if
If you hire or let somebody go.
right, or maybe someone dropped their insurance, or maybe someone who didn't have it before picked it
Has to
up,
come on.
right? I'm trying to remember what else he said. He has just had talked to a few other counties, we know it needs to be improved, but we're not sure how. So
Right.
I thought that was good research. I mean, that would be
Yes.
more accurate to do it based on last year's actuals.
Yes. It would be helpful for all of us, and planning is the hard part. You
Right.
know, we're hitting a moving target.
Right.
We agree.
And
Ideally, it would all be paid for from the commissioner's fund, but the general fund doesn't have the money to do that. So I don't know if there's any way it could be brought in over the next 4 years, or, we haven't even talked about what that would look like. We've just been talking right now, we have the $1 million balance we've been trying to maintain. We know last year we budgeted 7% over actuals, which really isn't that significant when you're talking about the amount.
right.
So right now we're just gathering information, but did you say, going back to what you were saying, that your breaking even this year is not including the additional health insurance money? Is that what you said?
It is including.
It is including it.
So if we could remove the 45,000, because it was 22.5, I believe is what Shannon quoted me in the last meeting. So if I
Yes.
don't hire 2 full-time positions.
Removing the extra cost from those two.
That would
right.
put 45,000 back into
Right.
my 1159 account, and I would be comfortable.
From my perspective, that's what should be done. Otherwise, you're carrying burden for employees you don't have.
Right.
And I feel like from what Debbie said, it would probably be okay, but
It's just, how do we do that?
I know the last few years, I think it started 3 years ago, we had a discussion about the inequity of what different highway, park, 911, and health were paying. And we were amazed. It was like, Chad was here on that first discussion we had. I don't think it had been looked at in years, because we were just happy
I think one
that we were running
department,
in the red overall in the general fund.
Right.
one department was only paying like $5,000 a person, and one was paying 30-some.
It was unbelievable, the discrepancy, and there was no logic to it at all. So we started in using logic rather than a dartboard. And last year, we ended up with 22.5. And then what we did for every department, we added one person extra in case there was movement within the year. But at least, and it was 22.5. But
And the
when we started,
22.5, if you take, Brian and I were looking, if you take the COBRA rate for the family and add it, what was it? If we added the three? And then divided it. It came out like the exact average. Yeah. Average of the family and the single rate was exactly 22.5.
we actually looked at the departments and what they had. We asked the department heads, or we asked somebody in HR, I don't know, but we asked how many families, how many singles, how many employee plus children, how many employee, spouse, family, and it came out an average of 22.5, and that's
So the question would be, if we used last year's actuals, where does that, it helps you, helps Brian, so does it hit the general fund, and we would just have to be, or does it hit the highway department? You know, who is hurt by it, and what could we do to?
So, question, I know talking through some of this, we've mentioned the highway department that's in this tax levy, my department, the park, and then I was also under the impression that there was some assessor was under it. Is there anything that comes out of that tax levy that goes to the assessor?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Debbie's not here, but not that I know
if
of.
it is, it's state mandated, and we don't have a say in it, but I don't think so.
I don't know.
911 is.
Okay, because, and the reason I'm asking is because Jody and her two employees are in the general fund and not. So I was curious about that.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I
that
feel
was
like for
Curious
the,
about a lot of things in 2019.
I know.
the highway department is, and this may be oversimplifying someone else's budget, but so affected by material cost that if they have to take a hit somewhere, they just get less work done,
Less
I think.
asphalt.
Right. So, you know, what you're describing is more of you had to reduce your head count, whereas
Right, I
it
did-
might have cost us a mile of highway. I don't know.
Yeah, they have 24 employees.
And so they 100% have to pay each one of their employees' health insurance like.
Yes, because they have a different tax rate. Somewhere historically that, again, maybe it was to salvage the general fund.
Yeah.
It was weaned out to you with separate tax rates, and that was well before we
I
came.
feel like that number didn't change dramatically when we redid it in budget session. Do you remember?
You mean last year?
The highway department, yeah, I remember it really
I don't
affected you,
remember
and I
those
remember it
numbers.
really helped the park, but I don't remember if it had affected highway
The
significantly.
year before, we used a similar, and I think it was like 20,000. And so we were working towards that equitable distribution then, and then we fine-tuned it last year by actually finding the numbers of how many in what category of insurance. And we came up, like Brian said, with that average of 22.5. So that was been the most equitable it has been
Right.
probably
Oh,
in a
I'm-
decade. But
I'm
it's,
sure.
but now I think Shannon and working with Susan in particular, working at even a more equitable way, maybe eventually get it back into the general, but it's like getting some of these departments closer to market. We don't have the revenues to do that in 1 year. It's usually a 3 to 5 year process to get there.
Okay,
We're chipping
so-
away at it.
So did you say
Yeah,
your
that's
date,
a good segue. Can we talk about that?
did you say your date was June 1?
June 1's when I have to have the Health First Indiana
I
budget.
think if we get, the problem is historically, and again, we may have to rethink this, we do the raises the very last thing. In the last 5 years, it's not been until mid-August because we have to see what everybody else is. So it would be a guess.
Well, here-
But I feel like late raises has been problematic for everyone and probably needs to be changed. It's really hard for Debbie. And now we're hearing from Angela. I'm just saying maybe we need to not do it last, which is why we started with WIS doing the new job
Right.
classifications.
We have that in place that might help, because you talk about discrepancies, things in job classification were kind of over the map. So we're trying to sort some things out to make it more even and making sense and equitable across departments, but we're finding that it's not a simple task.
It is, and I appreciate the work, and I can feel your pain. But again, when we're talking about those of us who are not in the general fund, we have a finite amount of income coming in, and then to look at this, and in 3 years, I've lost $64,000 of what should have been my, steady bankroll. And I am asking, I don't know how to budget for that and maintain that and not end up in the situation, that the department was in several years ago. I don't know, because everything's budgeted out. I don't have, and maybe I should. So if somebody can tell me how I'm supposed to do that, but in my brain, if I continue to have a 3% increase every year, and I either stay at the same income or below, and our fees, it's just like the park. There's no way the park could impose fees high enough to
Right.
cover any of that.
Yeah.
We can't either. And then to think, with the Health First money, that we are growing and can grow with our staff, doubling our health insurance, in and of itself, let alone the raises.
So I have a question for you. I
Yeah.
can completely understand what you're saying this year, just with looking at the numbers. So if you get the 1.4 next year in 25, so how does that change
Well,
what you're talking about?
what I'm talking about, so that's a question, and I go next week to talk to our regional financial rep at the state. And that's one of the things that I intend to ask her, how am I supposed to budget in raises? And a lot of the department, Marion County, for example, did not put all of their employees into that Health First. They could have. They have that much money, but they didn't. They split them. So I did the same. That was a recommendation. So I took our three highest paid plus our health officer, and I moved us over into the Health First funding. And then I left the rest of the employees in 1159 and then I added some part-time into the health first. But with that, and especially if this is going to go down and the insurance goes up, I'm definitely going to have to move positions over into that. So what the state is wanting to see is programming, and they're encouraging us to partner with outside entities and to, possibly share funding if we can to meet these key performance indicators. But all of us are still trying to level the ship because we've been so understaffed for so long that we're hesitant to give money to these programs yet until we know what's going to happen. So
Last year, we gave everybody the direction of 3%. The year before, we gave a 2.9% raise, and that was upon the heels of a 9% national inflation rate. And that was because we made an absolute commitment the last 3 years so we can get out of that zero general fund balance of balanced budget. And each year we did that because Baker Tilly in their 5-year plan goes very conservative with their numbers.
Right.
And we get supplemental lits that are not calculated at that because they're not guaranteed. And last year we finally said, look, every year by balancing the budget, we've gone from 0% general fund cash balance to 15% to 22%.
Right.
Last year was 30%. We finally made a command decision. We're going to dig into that a little bit. And we had monies probably for a 4% raise to balance the budget. We went over because every year we actually literally balanced the budget. We were building up 7 to 8% in the general fund. So that was a decision partially because the year before we gave a 2.9% when the national average was 9. Let's go for it. Let's do 5. We had no idea starting in the end of July that we were going to go over 3%. We just made a decision. We're going to bite the bullet, and we'll have to see this year how much our balance would have been projected at 33%, and Baker Tilly suggests 50% or 6 months worth of running.
right.
It would have been, but by us going 5% instead of 4% raise, we're actually going to bump that 33 down probably around 27 or 28. So we're going backwards. And this year we'll see how that, well, by the end of April, he's going to have a 5-year. It's going to be interesting to see how that decision is going to pan out in their 5-year plan. But I can say the way we do budgets, because we meet with other counties and ICCA, the Indiana County Council Association, their timing is about exactly like ours. We're not behind or there's a
and
lot
I'm
of
sure my counterparts in all 90 other counties are screaming and their heads are on fire like mine was the other night.
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah, I'm just saying we're probably the norm, but we're trying to move it up.
I have,
But if we had to say we're going to go 4, we can't do anything until we see the Baker Tilly, because that would be indeed just doing
Well,
a
it doesn't
blackboard.
matter whether it's a 0.4 or a 4% raise. It still doesn't change the fact that those of us who are in a finite setting out of the general fund, in order to meet your requirement of raising for our staff, we have to take away something.
Even with the additional from the state.
Let's forget that even's on the table,
Well, I
Kenan.
can't, you have it in front of me.
Because, well, Brian's not
I
going to
see
get that
it.
additional.
I see
Mark's
1.4
not gonna
million.
get
I
that
can't forget it.
additional. I know, I'm in a very special situation. I get it. So here's what I would like to say to you is if I think you're going to do what I think you're going to do, if you're going to try to raise it another 5% and that's going to put us at that bottom, at that minimum, I would like permission to step outside of the arena and go ahead and bite the bullet and do it for my staff and get there. I don't want to be chopping a finger off. I feel like a diabetic.
I think that is a fair statement, because one thing that the council can do is set a plan for wages. Are we going to hit 20% below? Are we going to get to 10% below? Are we going to actually pay average market wage?
Right.
And are we going to raise taxes to get to average market wage? And that's something we can do before budget session. We may not know exactly what the job classifications are. We might not know exactly where people fall, but we could talk about what our goal is for our employees.
We're all of
So
my
I think that's
staff,
fair.
Yeah, are clearly 5% below the minimum. We did that math together. So that raise put us there. And that report that I gave you from all of the health departments around the state, we're in good shape. We're not underpaid
Well,
as a health.
that's one thing I was going to ask you. With all this, theory and what ifs. Overall, in your department, what do you think the overall health of your department is now versus 7 years ago or 6 years ago, whenever you came on? I know it was before I came on. Let's say overall health.
Oh, it's 100% better. Yeah, no, and I don't, and I tell everybody that. Yeah,
I'd
I
like to
came
hear
in with
that.
tourniquets, and I literally,
Well,
I had to put tourniquets on. I'm telling you, it was bad.
when I first heard you, when 2019, you and I came on together, and Chad did also, it seemed dismal. But it wasn't just you. It sounded like department after department after department was dismal.
And that was the point of the Health First funding, because we had been crying to the state for 2 decades that because of the property tax caps and all of this, you know, we couldn't ever sustain anything. So the goal is that the state is supposed to be giving us sustainable funding that we can count on, and it's not a grant. So we get it all up front January 1, so we're not having to mess around and wait everything. So the one thing that I need to know in order to do that budget is to know, because the 1159 isn't going away. They didn't, you know, put that law to bed and say that doesn't apply anymore. It still applies, so the tax levy still stands. They did say, you know, the county has to have a match. And so the 2 things I need to know as soon as possible is, are you going to, if the projected funds will be higher than the $317,941, that's the match listed here, are you going to allow me to keep anything over that would have normally prior to the Health First funding? Are you going to let me keep that or not? Let
We
me
haven't
know.
had that discussion yet, but it sounds like we really have to have that
Well,
discussion.
right. So there's that piece of it. And what is that threshold? If we're shooting for the minimum, you know, that,
But I have a question, because did you just say that based on some report, you don't think your people are underpaid?
that I gave you all a copy of that book that was
Right.
from
I
Indiana.
haven't. I saw it recently.
I don't
And they
remember.
were doing a study of similar positions throughout the state.
We weren't that bad.
We weren't.
So does that make you question the reliability of the WIS data, or no?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do, because if they're looking at, and that was another reason that I had my head exploded about that 5% raise, was because I knew that there were departments out there that were going to inflate wages as soon as they got the money. Delaware County did, you know, I mean, immediately. And so I think that
You
it'll
mean
be
from
a
their
couple-
state Senate Bill 4 monies last year, they inflated, that's the extra money we're talking about?
Yeah.
The
And I know
options
that
left in
because
it.
they've been poaching my environmental staff.
Yeah, you
ever
mentioned
since
that
I
to
came
me.
out. So,
Before,
tipped his
before
hand.
the state money, you feel like your pay was competitive?
before the state money, we were competitive, yeah.
Could you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Could you go on WRTV and say the positive things that you just said?
The positive things?
Yeah, that you're much better off than 6 years ago, that you're competitive with other counties, that, you know, I just think it's nice that it's not just negative news that Stacy reads in the Courier,
Oh, well,
that maybe there's some positive things that directions we've made. Just
We
offset.
won't put you on the spot and make you do that.
It's just a request, but it's obviously up to you.
I have another numbers question. So the 1.4 million, you have to match with 317,000, so you wouldn't have that. So that's 1.1 million left.
let's see. So the 1.4, we're going to, I'm pretty confident we're going to get that match
Right.
because of our rate,
And then you have to match with the 1159 funds.
the
So you
317. So it would be
wouldn't have that.
1.4 plus the 317.
Oh, okay, I thought, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
yep.
Well, I think we've been told by different departments it'd be nice to know sooner. There's just some data we have to have from the state and from Baker Tilly. And see, like 70 counties use Wagner, Irwin, Shealy. They seem to have confidence. Now, is it end all accuracy. I don't know, last year they had the county council making above market. They just put out the latest and they made that correction. We're not near market. But that's what they had last year, and there's posts on social media that alluded to the fact that we were one of the 3 departments that were getting paid above. It was inaccurate.
Right.
They've since corrected it. So they're human, but there's the vast majority of counties use them because they're about the only game that does even tries to do the kinds of things they do with market. So they're not perfect, but they help us.
So what programming are you expected to do with those additional funds, like at a super high level?
At a super high level, we've got a whole area of maternal child health that we really haven't even touched. That there's several indicators in that to help combat the infant mortality rates, accidental SIDS and things like that. And that's just a piece that takes people. And that takes a special kind of nurse, not just not me. That's not my background, so.
You serve on, some committees with me, some groups in like the women's transition, and I did listen to the commissioners' meeting. I didn't get to it till today, but I listened to it. And you had Mary Kate Dickelson, Light Source, her group?
Lightkeepers. Mm-hmm.
Lightkeepers. And I didn't know, it was good to hear Westminster. Something's going to happen to that. That was good news.
That's good.
What areas, I read the statistics of how our county compares with the different health matrix, same with the educational field, but I also interested in the health fields. And we seem to be kind of low in some of those metrics, smoking, obesity, you go on.
We are, and that is why we got the maximum amount for the first year with the HFIs, why I'm pretty confident, we haven't, we didn't get obese in 2 years. We're not going to be lean and mean in 1.5. So what we're trying to do this first year is trying to get our benchmarks set and our relationships in place and our processes in place so that in 2025, when we get the remainder of this funding, we can start getting programming out the door. So.
And some of the funds be used for rehab services, and is that something that interests you? Like drug rehab, is that what this is for, or is that not what this money's for?
It could be. They've left a lot of it wide open, but what I am standing true to is getting the core, staffing level of our health department. And I think maybe I sent this out to you at one point, sorry, but there was a calculator where you put in the population and what risk levels you had on certain things, and Henry County Health Department should have 28 to 30 employees, by that metric. We're so not even close to that, it's not funny.
And I'm going to guess most counties, with maybe the exception of the donut counties, because I remember that report you gave, it was a thick report, and they were pretty high. I mean, I don't know any county met it. Maybe there were 1 or 2, I don't know. But it was high.
Yeah.
Could you resend us your proposed budget for this fund? Is that something I can probably get it from Debbie too.
This
the
year's?
state fund, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now that I've heard it all again, I want to look at that again.
Right.
And I'm going to let Susan be in your liaison, and Shannon, who likes to do research by contacting counties, kind of be the lead on working with you.
It's also, it's available, and that was the other thing that the state did. It's on, if you Google Health First Indiana budgets, it's online. So you can look at it and you can compare how we've spent in other areas as well.
You received Dr. Weaver, right? Is that her name? Mm-hmm. Okay. Henry County received an award. That was in the paper. Angela received at the chamber, I know there are about 12 categories. Are you tired of getting accolades? Frontline hero. Thank you, Bobby. That was the category. Frontline hero. And every category had very worthy organizations,
Oh, gotcha.
entities, businesses, people, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm guessing the voting was by chamber members. It doesn't make any difference, but Angela was the frontline hero in Henry County. So congratulations, well
Thank you.
earned. The person that was also nominated against you, well earned, the young man who went into burning fire to save an elderly person. But congratulations. And
Well, thank you for,
You wanted us to do two things: tell you what our raise amount will likely be, what our
Right, I mean,
expectation,
if
our
you're-
goal,
Yeah,
and then whether or not we're going to let you keep money above the match. Is that what you said?
exactly.
Okay.
And I don't know, that probably needs to be a conversation with DLGF and the commissioners, because there's a process in that. And I think you were here, I know, Susan, when we did, at the very beginning of my tenure, and we made some type of a change. So I don't think it's just a matter of the council being able to just go, oh, I'm going to give that to the park or whatever. I think there was a process that had to go through that.
if it's state-related, there's a process.
Yes.
DLGF, State Board of Accounts.
So, but for what it's worth, and to the audience that's listening, if I can change my name to Henry County Department of Health instead of Henry County Health Department, and that will open my doors for lots of grants, sign me up for that, for the young
That's
lady
kind
that
of what
was here
Stacy
ahead of
was
time.
talking about.
Huh?
Sometimes a name change can make all the difference in availability of grants.
It's a name. It's
Yeah.
a name. You want me to wear a different uniform every day? I'm on it. Got it. Shoom. Timu, here I come. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's about,
up to you.
guys.
My mom wore the nurse hat.
And we wouldn't be where we are doing the things that we're doing. We haven't even had that Health First Indiana long enough to spend it. But one of the reasons I think that we received the award as a department and people are talking about us is because out of necessity, out of being poor and broke, we had to make partnerships. And in order to make things happen, we've got to work with the other poor and broke, nonprofits and programs in town to make things work. So if we can do that and then have some money on top of it, everybody better get out of our way.
What was that award we got for Henry County from the State Department? What was that called?
Community Impact Award.
I think she and her colleagues were pretty impressed over there at the hospital that day you put together that presentation. I could kind of tell they were impressed. Relatively small county doing relatively great things, and I think
And I remind them all the time that even though you get online and you look at that HFI budget for us, you don't see that Jamie Owens position there, and that's because she's in the health fund, the 1159 funding right now, So that was a huge thing we did. That's a huge position. It's an expensive position because of the licensing that's required for that. So right out of the gate, we made a huge impact with mental health and substance abuse by simply bringing her on as a health department employee.
well,
And
she's
I'm gonna
heading
fight
up.
to keep her.
Pardon me. She's heading up other very important programs like the women's transition. So, thank you very much. Award well earned. And next we have, if there's no other questions, next we have Mandy and. Brian was here, but he left. We have an EMS shortfall. I know that was a topic on the commissioners meeting I listened to this afternoon, but again, I think Shannon and
Hello.
Stacy is Stacy.
Shannon asked me to stop in here. I don't know how much you know or don't know.
We know there's a shortfall because of their billing source, and it had something to do with something, and they just dropped you like a hot potato.
Kenan and I know that. Was that? I'm not sure
I
how
don't think you were part
many
of those
people know that.
text threads or email threads. This is hot off the press.
Okay. I reached out to him to let him know, it was about 2 weeks after it happened, just because we've spent 2 weeks, myself and Jessica, night and day, weekends, trying to get a new biller and get a new system implemented because we have no time to spare. March 1st, I was actually here in the courtroom to have a scheduled meeting with Bobby and the president of our billing company. It was planned. I had been putting a lot of pressure on them, I'm not going to lie, to be transparent and to explain why our deposits were so inconsistent when we are very consistent, and we are getting busier, busier, and busier, so our deposits should be more consistent. Because I rely on those and budget off those, and, you know, if $10,000 to $15,000 difference in a deposit, and then it's up 30, and then it's down another 15, I can't budget on that.
So you're saying that's because they're not doing it regularly?
They weren't polling regularly. So we were talking about that and actually had a plan I was going to drive to Elkhart, take Jessica, who was going to talk with their billers that run Image Trend, to set some things up in Image Trend that'll help us communicate with them. And then Jim and Pam and I were going to have a conversation about how we could be more transparent, communicate better, so I'm more aware of where runs are and if they've been billed and what the return is and if they were non-billable, because I was waiting 30-plus days to find out, and a lot of times that's too late, and I need to know that so I can get back on top of those. And so I was putting a lot of pressure on him. I did have a very intense conversation with him that week, and so much so that he involved Bobby. Bobby let him know that she doesn't run my department, I do, and while she's more than willing to talk to him, I would be present. And we scheduled that meeting. We were supposed to be here at 10 a.m. that morning, and before she could even get here, she called and said I had to pull over. I got an email from him. I had gotten the same email, and he was terminating billing services effective immediately.
Was there a contract that they broke? Or
We were out of contract as of January for a couple of reasons. One, we had to ask for the contract, couldn't find it. So I had no idea, neither did the auditor's office. So they actually got with ambulance billing and requested a copy because it's nowhere to be found. When we got that, we realized that it was needed renewed on January 1st, but this was mid-February before we even saw, and they even brought it to our attention that we were off contract. So I used that time to not re-sign that contract immediately to do a little research. And I had a couple of meetings with some billing companies, one in particular that the city was moving to, listen to. They could correct a lot of issues that I was having with ambulance billing as far as transparency. I have my own portal. We upload the runs when we're ready. We track them on all these sites. We can see exactly where they are. However, we're also right in the middle of going back ALS at the advanced level. I've got 3 people that are doing an education. I didn't think that ultimately, as much as I wanted that transparency, it wasn't a good time to switch billing companies. And we were going to revisit it with them in a year. So I was ready to re-sign after we had a meeting and a renegotiation about price. And in the meantime, when he realized the contract wasn't signed, he actually sent a new contract with a lower rate. And I was like, okay, so he's probably heard the city's looking, he knows that I've looked, and I've always told him that I would be very transparent. So when I called him, I told him that I had had meetings with billing companies, and it wasn't going to do either one. It wasn't in either one of our best interests at that time for me to move. He didn't need to deal with it, and I didn't have time, nor did I think this was the appropriate time to have a lapse in funding. We were on the same page, and it was a intense but very good and productive conversation, and we had a plan. Fast forward to that morning. I still don't really, I have my ideas, but I really don't know and have not been given a reason. There wasn't a reason in the termination. I do, however, know that, and what caused Brian to go look for this email, Brian had decided to switch services, and I wasn't going to follow him at least this year. He had sent a certified letter to ambulance billing services because we have the same services, and they had gotten it the night before.
So there might
And
be a
suddenly the next
correlation.
morning, not only was I terminated, but Brian didn't even realize it, and I said, you should probably go see if you've got this email, and sure enough, he did. They also terminated, they weren't even going to bill for 90 days for Brian. They shut it off. So it sent us both in a scramble. He was already implementing, but plus he's got money to fall back on. It panicked me because I know that will be a lapse in funding. That's a lapse of revenue, and that's how we survive. So
Right. What was the amount that you're going to be short over the next
it's
couple
hard
months?
to tell. That's what I was trying to explain. I don't know. I can best guess estimate, and even when I talked with MediCount yesterday, he is hoping to be fully consistent mid to late May, but it could go into June. I do have a cushion in the bank, about $114,000. I never like to go below $100,000. So to me, I have 14,000, and there's a reason for that, because we
Right.
have to be prepared for things that,
That's
like
like us,
this, are out of our control.
like health insurance.
Yes,
The year
so,
we didn't have a buffer, went 750,
right,
800,000.
and
on
it
the red.
fluctuates. I mean, it was right at 150,000 in January, and then we got big bills that come in January, we have big bills that come in June, which I guess are gonna be even bigger come July, or the June-July area, or whatever. I'm really concerned to see our workman's comp and things like that, because I'm sure they're going to go up.
One of the questions I asked Shannon was, does the delay in funding that will be inevitable because you're switching services, does that make it less likely to recoup as much when we do bill?
I hope not. We pulled, before they could, not only did they stop billing service, they gave us 14 days to get on the state site image trend. They kicked us out of image trend, which I think there's about 3 things that I'm gonna have to talk to you about. I'm pretty sure they breached all kinds of contracts and all kinds of things. I did set aside, and I was just taking notes, and Jessica took notes of things we found in the process, but I couldn't focus on that. I still can't until I have the billing coming in. Once we got in there and realized we needed to pull things, we had to get help from other people, and we had one of the people that worked for him, she was helping us. They don't know either. They really don't know either. They don't know what happened. And so they're trying to be as helpful as can. I just talked to one of them again yesterday, and she's been very helpful. And I told her, I said, I'm just confused. I don't know what's happened. And she sighed, and she started to offer some information, and she stopped herself and said, I just work here. And I said, there's something that I'm not being told, and at this point, it doesn't even matter. Honestly, I have to fix the problem.
So do you have a new billing company?
I have one in place. In fact, they dropped us, and by the following Monday, I was already getting things prepared to move to a new company.
And how quickly can they turn over, and do they address the ones the other company that dropped the ball on? I mean, there's some outstanding ones, right?
More so than I knew. That's the other issue. That's ultimately what led me to reach out to Shannon in the first place. Once we started pulling the runs that they had not billed yet, so they would pull all of our runs, what's called exported to billing. They'd take them off of our site and move them to them, and then they would bill them. We assumed that meant they were being billed. It didn't. So it would appear that they were polling on a regular basis, but when we finally really got in there and started realizing by auditing, realizing what we had to do once we had that power to look at that, they hadn't done anything in February at all, only half of March. Some runs are still open from December, so we are way behind. That is what concerns me, because if it was just I'm going to have this implemented, and we're going to be live on new billing by April 1st. We'll be going. I tried to get it before then, but we went too fast, and they're not ready because they have to build the site. So
you're saying it's not just the lapse; it's
months
of
behind,
of
yes.
being behind, and that would make it less. That would make it more likely to not recoup.
Yes.
I would say.
Yeah. So now, as soon as we go live, we have already, how many you think, 200 so far that we've uploaded to them? To about 250 runs we have setting there. As soon as they go live, they're ready to be pulled and to start being billed. So they're taking everything we thought they had already billed. We backdated it because it was supposed to go for March 1st when we were dropped. But after telling them I've discovered all of these runs, we backdated it to January 1st, and they're not going to charge us anymore for that. They understand the situation, and they've worked very fast. This is supposed to be a 90-day process. We will have done it in less than a month. So in the long run, this will benefit us. We have our own image trend site that no one else can control. They are charging us less than any other company, and they're paying for our image trend.
So you're going to have a windfall of January through whatever the time period that they catch up.
I hope it's a windfall. I hope
But
it's
you've
like,
So I'm
Going to rain money.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, we have a rain tree, but we don't have a money tree. You may have to tap into that $100,000 buffer, but it sounds like you're going to more than be able to put that back in and replenish it. If not, you have to come to us and we'll additional appropriation. And I read something like.
So, we are still, let's see, for example, the last report I looked at, we're still collecting from October, November. There's still runs trickling in. And it just depends on who they're going to. Some are you can 30 to 45 days, they're going to return on that. If it could go to Anthem, we might not get paid for 6 months. And that's why when he asked me, I was like, there is no way for me to tell you. We have never been outside of billing before, ever. It's always been consistent. I made it more consistent and got rid of all the ones that couldn't be billed, and we audit every single day now. But I've never known a time when we weren't consistently putting runs in there to constantly keep it moving. It's going to happen, because right now, no one's billing our runs, not any of our new runs at all. And I don't know what that means. Last week's my deposits in February were $81,000. My deposit this last Friday from ambulance billing was $7,000. They're only collecting on runs that are already out. They are no longer billing, which I believe that's a breach, because the contract states that they will not take new runs. But this is all January and February. This is not new runs. These are not new people. They had them and had exported them.
So that's why you're needing to talk to Joel.
And yeah, we'll eventually.
So you're only loading
right now.
You're only loading new runs into the new system. And
No, the new system has every run that we have found that they have not billed.
Okay.
And all
But
the
you
runs.
still feel like the old company, I don't know its name, that they breached the contract. Is that what you're saying?
The key is, were we technically under contract? It had expired in January. We were not a self-renew.
Yeah, work with Joel.
However, we just saw where some runs were being uploaded to the state from 2018. Explain that. I have no idea. There's a lot of things I've seen that doesn't make sense. I had to break into our national provider site. I had to break into the Medicaid site. It's like, okay, when I say break in, I mean someone else had control over our service in those sites, in our NPI, and they shouldn't have. And when I talk to all of these people,
Thanks for the clarification.
I don't know the appropriate words. It's legal.
Well, break-in has a
Is that
negative
better?
connotation.
I
know
legally
that.
backdoored all of these sites to finally get in there and get control to give the other company access, just to find out that one person in a billing company should have never been the administrator on those, ever. It gave them 100% authority. They should have been an added user where they could go in, and I don't know why that was like that. So I've learned a lot, so we're going to look at it that way. This will benefit us in the long run, but it also could completely take us out in a month, because I'll eat it up with payroll. I'll eat up my reserves with payroll.
What is your payroll each month?
My payroll was $38,000 in February. My bills range between 10 and 12, depending on if it's a high gas volume. If we use a lot of O2, it depends on the runs. And that fluctuates. So usually I add a little bit to that balance every time we get a deposit, even with what's going out. And then I'm prepared for January's and July's when those big bills come in, and it'll drop back down, which it is, and it was just starting to build back up like it does. I have a stress panic attack every January. She can tell you I'm over here flipping out. And every January it happens, because I've got to pay those really massive bills, ambulance payments and all of those things. And then it starts building back up, and by July I'm ready to have a panic attack again, because I have to wipe it all out, but then we build it back up.
So you know,
This got me worried, because there's nothing going to come in to build that back up.
well, you've been at it long enough. You know how these fluctuations go.
Consistently, I don't see how it couldn't be consistent by June for sure. Only because, one, we've loaded them with a ton of runs. They've audited runs. We've talked with every department we can in there. They're, one, pleasantly surprised, very surprised that we audit like we do. There's not a whole lot they have to do. They literally just need to send them to billing, because we've already done it. That's why we all took the CADS course. That's why I hired a biller. So I basically submit. So we should be, if they can get on it. The other hitch that we didn't realize until we had our meeting with Ted yesterday is we're a little bit of a default, because it takes longer. All the runs I've pulled from ambulance billing are in a PDF patient care report form. That gets uploaded to them. Whereas now that we're on the new system, we will automatically export. And then their system is designed to audit those runs from an export. So someone's literally going to have to go through page by page of a PDF report online to bill this. It's going to slow them down. So
What we need from you is, as this goes through the system and this new billing company, you end up with a little bit of a record. That may take a month or two, some history with them. You'll need to come to us. Our April meeting's on the 10th. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but it's the second Wednesday in May. Before you go in and dig into $114,000, need to come to us and ask for additional appropriation and give us an update as to where you are. But it sounds like the research you've done on this new company might be advantageous in the long run.
Yeah, I did know it would cost me my billing services, but I think between that and they knew the city was switching, and we try to stay as consistently cohesive as possible, and I think that he probably assumed, even though I told him I wasn't, he would like cut his losses and ran. Why he's been so nasty and cut us off of everything and stopped billing, I don't understand.
Is Newcastle going with the same new company, or do you know if Newcastle's going with this?
Yep, we
Okay,
both
so you have some
are working with Ted from MediCount. Yep.
So you lean
Can
on
I-
each other helping.
Can I ask a question about the process here? So,
Sure.
okay. I give you two hypothetical situations. Can you tell me if either is more right than the other? So,
Yeah,
okay, if you go through your $100,000 reserve hypothetically, and then you make it over into June, do you expect then to, if you make it without going on, like if you make the 100,000, that's enough, then do you get the money back? You get to put your $100,000 back in, or does it take you a few months to put your $100,000?
It would take me a while to build it back up.
Okay.
Yeah, I imagine it'd be a slow climb. I'm sure there'll be moments where that is a big deposit because a lot are going to come in at the same time. The only concern that I have is if they push those too much and all of a sudden Medicare has our runs trickling in and all of a sudden 100 get thrown on them all at once, it could potentially cause an audit for Medicare to come in because that's a lot. That's a huge uptake. I'm trying to subvert that by getting in and getting control of our own sites, and I'm available now to answer questions for them, and I can set tickets up and stuff and communicate with them, and I'm hoping to kind of go around that, but that's a potential. So I know that they're not going to try to just spam them, basically, because that's what it would look like, is spam. How would they suddenly just do, even though they're dates and they're consistent? I mean, it would make sense if you really looked at it, but that's not how they look at it.
You have another question?
Is there any way to forewarn Medicare?
Well, they're forewarned now because I've had, like I said, I had to legally backdoor into everything. So I have talked to Medicaid, Medicare, Anthem, Availity, you name it. I have talked to them in the last 2 weeks. We now have our own users and all of those things in those. So they're aware that we didn't have access to that and we were changing because of a new billing company. And so I've laid the groundwork as best that I can for that. But you never know if that goes on to the next person that needs to know it, if I talk to the right person. So.
Well, backdoor doesn't sound as severe as break-in, so.
Sorry. So,
Legally broke in. It was our right to take control of our sites.
Well, if the sheriff or the chief of police comes in, we'll know they're online.
Yeah.
so if you knew that if you go through your $100,000 and the council can support you if you eat up your reserves, does that help you, or do you still prefer help up front and not go through?
No,
No.
I don't want help
Doesn't matter
up front.
either way.
And I
Okay.
know that Shannon mentioned a loan. There's no way I could take a loan. I have no idea even what I'm talking about here. I don't know what I need. We could all be pleasantly surprised. I doubt it. When has it ever worked like that for us? We fight for everything. So we'll fight through it. We'll figure it out. But I'm not going to be like the former people that ran this place and not give my employees any heads up that the money's running out. I'm talking, if I get down to 2 payrolls and I don't see any way out, I'm going to start telling them. They're going to know. We're not going to find out by our family's newspaper, obviously.
Well, come to us and keep us posted.
Yep. And I do have a couple of ideas. We sold all of our ambulances. I'm going to come to the council and ask that money that's sold from all of the junkyard ambulances be reappropriated to us. And then I'm looking into seeing if I can sell the Mercedes, if I can get a decent amount of money from those. We don't use them. We keep them up and maintained because they're technically still certified and in an emergency.
Is that
We
the
could use them.
auction that you're referring to?
The auction is where we
That's
sold.
our third request for
Yep.
people to have their auctioned monies returned.
Yep.
3.
Yep, the auction money.
I'll delegate you to look into that. And as Shannon, your liaison?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like he's been communicating back and forth, which
yeah.
is good, kind of like Susan and Angela. And like we said with Angela, appreciate your diligence in keeping on top of these things and really researching and being very particular. And you said you had 3 ALS in the pipeline, people sort of going
Yes, yeah.
ALS?
Yeah, I have 3 in school right now, plus myself. Lucas will be finished, should be all done and back to work, and things should kind of slow down for us, at least over there. By May 1st, he should be completely complete. And I'm not going to go right into school, which was the plan, and that was everything that we had set, because this is not the time for that to happen.
You're still working well. I mean, there was a rift between Newcastle and Henry County EMS.
That doesn't exist anymore.
That's-
Everyone just needs
Yeah, the last
to
time you've talked, you
stop
said
mentioning that.
usually are coming in together and you're
Yeah.
coordinating plans for the next year, 2, 3.
Yeah, no, that just doesn't exist anymore. It
Well,
just,
that's good news.
that was a lot of misunderstanding and I don't know, narcissistic personalities, I guess. It didn't do any good, and it definitely benefits our county for the 2 services to work together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So any questions for Mandy?
Don't want to know about any other crimes I might be committing.
Keep us posted.
So when Mandy started working, I'm giving you some kudos here. So when Mandy started working with MedCount, when all of this went down, they told her that it would take her at least 30 days to get her end of it done, and her and Jessica did it in 11 days. So they worked almost 24 hours a day
And weekends.
to get that done. So
I mean, can you
they have taken,
Eric has asked me if I'm sleeping. No.
yeah. So
What's that? It's overrated.
So when we talk about the time frame, and had it taken them 30 days to get where they needed to be, we would probably look in July and August before we were getting any type of billing and funding. So kudos. to
We
you
do
and
appreciate your
Jessica.
diligence. I know you work hard like a lot of our heads, but thank you. We are seriously going to be discussing thank you for coming, Joel, looking at possible LITs. I gave you, council, how we rank as far as our average income, median household income, average household income, per capita income. That's this, and we don't look very good. Our per capita income's $20,000 compared with a state average of $35,600. We're number 76 out of 92 counties in our average Henry County per capita income. The highest per capita income is Boone County, which is twice ours, basically rounded, $39,000 to $20,000. So at any rate, I bring this up because I know there's talk about increasing taxes, which we'll probably have to do to survive certain departments, but just be aware that we have a poorer than average constituency and citizenship. So I think we need to balance out the needs of our shortages, and a lot of it stems back to tax caps and other kinds of things. The cap they put on 4% on our assessed valuation last year when house prices were going up 8%, and a lot more than that in the donut counties. We were capped at 4%. So when we gave a 5% raise, we were actually digging into our reserves a little bit. Just be aware of it. Right now, our total LITs, when you add everything together, is 1.8%. The average of all 92 counties is 1.89. And I know Shannon and Susan knows I would like not to go much above the state average, which is a moving target because every year it goes up about 0.01 to 0.02%. But be aware that we don't want to overtax. I think Reagan said that's not the problem that we taxed too little. It's government spends way too much. So, but we have to pay for certain essential services that the state doesn't. So they give us the opportunity to raise taxes when they cut them. And they're sitting on a $6 billion surplus. We're sitting on a 290,000 versus billion. So it's up to us to make up the difference, apparently. So what we're going to be talking about more extensively, and there's been some talks with like 3 of us at a time. There's an EMS lit. Right now we're paying $300,000 to Newcastle per year. We heard in January Mandy talking about a significant shortage with the ALS. We're going to have to see with the billing. We're going to have to see, but an EMS lit is an option for us. GeoLit, they did pass this legislative session that what was 0.2% last year, and a typo is actually 20% for operations, and that's going to help us. You should have gotten an email from Debbie, where the Sheriff's Department, because of the 0.2, we felt, even though we knew that was a mistake, and the State Board of Accounts knew that was a mistake, we had to take $415,000 out of GeoLit to meet what was literally in the law at that time. So what right now, and Susan, I think you can address this, but we're short like $500,000 in inmate medical that we took out of the budget for 2024. Uniforms, $44,500. Janitorial supplies in the jail, $47,900. Inmate supplies, $15,000. Jail maintenance, $50,000. Jail utilities, $50,000. Now that adds up to about $300,000 more than the $415,000 that we took out in September. I looked at the latest that we had from Debbie on our budget updates, and that does, if this is passed, which she's advertised because additional appropriations have to be advertised, to take this up at our April 10th meeting, this maxes out the jail. The only buffer we might have is last year we had about $200,000 in supplemental we got in August, September, that time frame. We can't count on that because it's not guaranteed. But last year we got $200,000. That might be the buffer we could look at, but we won't know that until fall. But we do have enough in there with the 20% operational to take care of what Debbie advertised.
I think the takeaway is that we could definitely cover that expense this year because we have reserves, but it's not sustainable.
Right.
Whereas the expenses are recurring, so that's the problem.
That is the problem. And at our last meeting we had, I know Shannon, and we need a clarification from AIC on this, said that actually that limit of 20% is for us who took out this, like 2020, the GeoLit, that it actually is higher than 20%. But our mortgage payment
there's no limit for us, right?
Yeah.
Is there a question about that?
Well, the question is, our payment on the bond is $1.7 million, which is, I think Debbie said, it's paid out twice a year, like January, July, or July, December, one of those two. And the buffer we have is a supplemental lits and other revenue sources, but most of it is the jail lit, and it brings in like $2.1 million. And the bond payment's 1.7. So this chews up that difference, unless we get the supplemental lit, which last year was $200,000. So that's a long way of saying this is going to, if this is passed in April, which it's legitimate funds that are projected that have been that.
Yeah, we had an interesting discussion because we used to have a different company for inmate medical, and the contract cost was $300-some thousand. The contract price was going to go up significantly, so we moved to a different one. I think it possibly wasn't as inclusive with all of the different inmate medical expenses. So I think that either way, it's a reflection of inflationary health care costs, but we didn't budget for it. But there's a list of things that are not included in the contract when they bring people in to do x-rays, when they bring people in to do dental work, prescriptions, thank you, pharmacology. All of these things are not included but have to be paid for. We are required by the state, we're required to pay for them. And they actually, I think it's QCC that we have the contract with, thank you. And they predicted that our expenses for the year would be about $700,000. And we budgeted less than half that. So Shannon and I are saying, okay, let's we'll increase it, we'll watch it, but I think we've spent 150 plus so far, so if you take that through the year, that's over 600,000.
Yeah, we did an additional appropriation of 100 earlier on, right?
Right. So, well, we took all the money out with this, the issue. If we had put it back in as we expected, we would just have the 300-some thousand, but we moved 100,000 over. So if we put in another 500,000, that'll be 600,000 total when we had budgeted, I think, 330, 308. I can't remember the exact amount.
I think it was 308. So at any rate, council, this will be on the agenda on April the 10th, and it's funding that we have to supply, and we have the data supported. But anyway, that's preview of coming attractions. Anything else on jail, sheriff?
No.
But that came about because of the typo at the state level, and we didn't feel like we could go against what was actually law at the time, but they have corrected it. Speaking of health insurance, I forwarded you the through February claims report, RX and medical from Josh Estel. We're still in decent shape. There's a buffer. I put in here that we try to keep $1 million because that's about how much we were shorted in 1 year by not having any kind of balance. And we seem to be holding fairly closely. Some months are higher claims than others, but we've been averaging about 170,000 a month, and that does not include RX. So you have that. I emailed Addie Roker, and it bounced back. She wasn't in, so we're going to find out from her how quickly we can get a market analysis for 2025. I don't know that answer yet. I put down some things. The LITs we're considering, and again, I really hope that you look at what our population's income averages are well below the state, that we're at least cognizant of that, but the state puts us in dire straits. The public safety can go to fire departments. There's a public law 1454 that last year they can come to us and ask. We have to give them a hearing. We don't have to grant the money, but I know there's strong needs there. I know the sheriff is pointing out we're still not competitive. And what I thought would be 3 years is probably going to take 6 years. The fact that the state keeps strapping us with limits on what we can get from our property taxes. And that's good for the constituents. It's just we don't know where we're going to get money. And those constraints come from the state. Yeah, we could raise all the money we need by just raising everybody's taxes, but that's not probably good for this county in particular. What we need, and I think Chad said this on Boss Hog, what we need are more bodies. We need to do things that lure people into Henry County. Yeah, and I know there's numerous organizations working on that, and I think we have a lot of good things going for us, and there's things in the pipeline going for us. I know the EDC is working on that, but there's probably 10 to 15 organizations working diligently that are not in the spotlight, working on making us more appealing. You know, the quality of life issues. A lot of people are doing a lot of great things, and they deserve kudos as well. But the real reality is we don't get, the state doesn't help us enough to meet the demands that are legitimate demands out there. So there's an EMS lit, there's the jail lit, they finally got straightened out at the state level, there's public service lit, public safety, fire departments have legitimate needs, EMS has legitimate needs. The new judicial lit, I wish Joel was here, we can find this out. At AIC, they did a pretty good job, and I forwarded you that PowerPoint from AIC from Monday. And anything relating to money, finances, and county councils at all, I forwarded to you. But one of the things we talked about at the last meeting is the judicial lit that was cut back. It's only for the courts, the bailiff, reporter, and administrators only. what was not on that PowerPoint, if it's still 50% of actual, they cut back the number of entities over in the courts, over in the Justice Center, like by 2/3 of what you can go forward, but I didn't see the 50% listed in the updated PowerPoint at AIC, so I just need a clarification of that. We know, I listened also to, it was in the paper, the budget, the park budget. We know we underfunded that because the budget request went into the state and that was held, so they're going to be asking for additional appropriations. You're the liaison for the
Yeah,
park.
so I met with the park board and I talked that through with them, and I think they understand exactly how much money they have now to use, and they're going to send their additional request to Debbie. So I think they're good now.
Okay, that is good to hear. Some of you were able to attend the commissioner's work session with DLZ. I did listen to it. I was out of state, but I did tune in. And you have been asked for comments to feedback to them. And if you had comments, hopefully you did. You had that opportunity. I don't think the EDC let's in the working is in the mix of strong consideration. Do you, Susan? It's one some counties have, but it seems like the public service.
What did you just say?
It's an EDC lit.
Right, so the EDC lit it used to be specifically for economic development, but now it's just for any purpose, so it's almost just like extra general fund money and a separate income tax, and it is shared across different taxing units.
So it would be distributed like the tax council.
I think so.
Public service is.
Yeah.
We get about 47%, I think. We said that we met on February 22nd after our February work session with Rex and Mike Guffey. There was a change of persons who was with Rex, and we talked a lot about EMS and public safety. Public safety requires Newcastle and the other taxing units to be involved in any decision with adjusting the public safety lit. We had a good conversation with him. And we also talked about the EMS lit and light that we've been budgeting $300,000 for Newcastle. And we heard Mandy in January. So I think the two that may be on the table are likely to give strongest consideration to in the months ahead would be the public safety lit and the EMS lit. So April meeting on April the 10th, work session in April's with the sheriff, judges, and commissioners to talk about talk seriously about jail pods needs and possible financing and what monies we have available and when. I think the $5.8 million that we took out on the 3 buildings is January 2027. So do we need to do something in the interim? And those kind of discussions we need to have because whatever we do is going to require financing. And we maxed out what Jason called it, the maximum amount of something or other. We maxed out when we did that last GEO bond for the $5.8 million. So we'll have to bring him into the discussion sooner or later. Questions? I'm sorry, this has gone an hour and 40 minutes, but April the 10th, same time, same station, same courtroom. Anything? Appreciate, Brian, did you have anything? Ann? Angela already spoke. Bobby spoke. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
People listening that we'll hear from on social media, thank you for listening.